Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Jeanette McNeely. We are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Dr. Ali Krashan, Ambassador of Jordan, His Excellency Second Secretary of Qatar, Mr. Fahad Al-Hamar, representing the Ambassador of Qatar, His Excellency Mr. Malad Rad, Ambassador of Lebanon, Ms. Noura Saleh, representing the head of the Palestinian delegation to Australia, Mr. Alastair Coe, Leader of the Opposition, ACT Legislative Assembly, Mrs. Wadad Raham, President of the Lebanese Forces Canberra branch, and Mr. Paul Andery. And we're also honoured to welcome Senior Lieutenant General Lee Chim, Deputy Minister of Defence, Vietnam, and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools: from New South Wales, MacKillop College, Mount St Patrick Primary School, Murwillumbah, and St Joseph's School, Weewall. And from Victoria, Beth Rivka Ladies College, St Kilda East. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Arthur Edmund Eyckens. The fourth of 9 children born to Leon and Eleanor Eyckens, Arthur Eyckens was born in 1898 in Beaufort, near Ballarat in Victoria. He attended Beaufort State School and gained some military experience in the local cadet corps. After leaving school, he became a farmer in the district. In July 1915, Arthur Eyckens decided to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force, following the footsteps of his 2 older brothers, who had enlisted in August and September 1914. He trained at Broadmeadows Camp, north of Melbourne, for several months. In November, he boarded the transport ship Wandilla and sailed for Egypt. By the time he had arrived in Egypt in December, the British commanders had decided to withdraw from Gallipoli. Eyckens joined his unit, the 31st Australian Infantry Battalion, and completed further training at the army camps near Cairo. The battalion remained in Egypt until June 1916, when it sailed to Marseille, and from there travelled by train to northern France near the border with Belgium. In July, the men had their first experience of battle at the French village of Fromelles, a disastrous assault on a heavily fortified German position. The 31st Battalion suffered over 550 casualties, over half of its strength wounded, missing and killed. Eyckens was wounded in action, having been shot in the hand and leg. He was evacuated to England, where he spent 3 months recovering in hospital. Eyckens remained in England for the winter months, where he undertook training at the army camps on the Salisbury Plain. By June 1917, he had rejoined his battalion in France. He had completed training as a dispatch carrier, a role that saw him carry orders and intelligence from headquarters to the front line. He was also selected for specialised training with carrier pigeons in July 1917. By September 1917, the 31st Battalion had spent over a year in support positions in northern France, and the unit diary notes that the men were keen to enter the front line. In September, the unit moved north, just over the border with Belgium, with a general expectation that a major attack was planned. 25 men in the battalion refused their allotted leave to England so as not to miss it. The British commanders were preparing to launch a major offensive in Flanders, fighting eastwards from the Belgian town of Ypres. The British sought to regain the high ground from the Germans. The 31st Battalion entered the front line of this assault in late September as part of the Battle of Polygon Wood. During the battle, Eyckens carried his wounded commanding officer behind the lines to a casualty dressing station before returning to the front. Having taken and held the shattered forest, the 31st Battalion occupied the ground in the days following the battle. On the 29th of September 1917, Eyckens was in a support trench when a shell landed in it. He and several other men of the unit were killed instantly. Arthur Eyckens was 19 years old. Eyckens' body was buried where he fell, but in the fighting over the following months, the ground was heavily shelled and the location of his grave was lost. His name is listed on the Meningate Memorial in Ypres, one of 6,000 Australians commemorated there for having no known grave. Arthur's 2 older brothers also served in the AIF. Private William Eyckens served on Gallipoli and the Western Front. He returned to Australia in October 1918 as part of a special leave granted at that time to Gallipoli veterans. Private Leon Eyckens arrived on Gallipoli in the initial dawn landings. He was badly wounded in the following month and spent time in hospital in England before returning home to Australia in March 1916. Private Arthur Edmund Eyckens' name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst more than 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his name listed on the Meningate Memorial is displayed today proudly beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Arthur Edmund Eyckens, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial, and we wish you all a very good evening.